All right. Test. How's this? Everyone can hear me? Surprising I can't hear myself, but that's okay. That's not that important. Okay, thank you, Bill, for the introduction. Like you said, we're going to be continuing our study of Hebrews 11. And so I thought it most appropriate in keeping with that. Oh, I let it go to sleep. To start with the only logical thing we could start with when discussing this, and that is, of course, Cinderella. Now, this is one of Cinderella's, of course, sterner looks. She usually looks much happier than this. And the reason I bring this up, of course, my kids love Disney, love all things Disney. That means, of course, there is no escape from musicals in my house. It doesn't happen, right? If a movie isn't on, one of my kids, or sometimes if you were to ask my wife, myself, is belting out some dulcet tone about wanting to trade my fins in for a pair of feet, okay? There's something like that going on in my house all the time. So you might wonder, what does that have to do with our passage this evening? And I wondered that myself. So I asked an AI image generator to answer the question for me. And here's what it came up with. I prompted it, I said, give me a picture of Jacob from the Bible in the style of Cinderella. This is what we got. I was trying to draw some correlation. I can't. I have no idea where it got this from. We can only speculate what's happening in this fictitious picture because I don't think it understood the assignment. So instead, allow me to present you with this analogy. Cinderella is actually kind of a messed up story, if you think about it. Like, beyond the glass slippers and the ball and, the pumpkins and all this stuff, right? Here we have a story of a victim of abuse, right? She was the youngest of her stepsisters. She was considered not that important, often mistreated with cruelty, made to work as a servant in their house. Later, her ball gown is literally ripped to shreds while she's wearing it by her only family. And then, after she does happen to have a fun evening, she comes home only to be locked in the attic in order to be prevented from having any type of future. That is the story of Cinderella. And you might take her perspective and go, wow, that's bleak. There's not a lot of hope there. And so, while Cinderella had to rely on some birds, some mice, and a fairy godmother to put her faith into, our study of Hebrews luckily reminds us that it is in God who we have faith. And that's far better than some wildlife and an imaginary fairy, I think. So, today, what we're going to talk about is the primary argument of Hebrews, is that God is real, He will keep His promises, and seeking Him is worth the effort. And specifically, we're going to look at seeking the blessings that come from God. Right? We're only going to have 2 verses in Hebrews, but I think there's actually quite a bit to unpack there. So let's get started. In verse 20 and 21, it says, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshiped as he leaned on top of his staff. So, with a casual reading of Hebrews, you could easily read over these 2 verses and just go, yep, 2 names in the list. Isaac, Jacob, and we always hear that, right? Whenever we read the Old Testament, even a lot of times in the New Testament, I am the God of who? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? We always hear that. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. And Jacob did the same thing while he was dying. But what does that have to do with faith? How does the act of conferring a blessing on somebody demonstrate faith. And why is that being included in Hebrews? To understand this, we need to take a deeper dive back into the actual story in Genesis, because I think to the original readers, perhaps, it didn't require much explanation at all. They could go off of these two things and they would have went, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In our modern day, I think maybe we have to dig a little bit deeper. So in Genesis 27, we pick up this story that says, when Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and your bow, go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." So Isaac is at the end of his life. Now it's time to pass on the blessing, because that's what you do at the end of your life, apparently. And I can't help, I don't know if you're anything like me, right? I see humor in a lot of things that maybe other people don't see humor in, sometimes inappropriately. However, this one, I couldn't help but think about this. I don't know if you know this movie, right? But I just picture this as like, he's like, "Come here, bring me the food. The blessing," right? Just like he does in Christmas Vacation. If you haven't seen this, highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. It's a good laugh. But what is this blessing that he's talking about? This is not the type of blessing that we say, "Lord, bless this food before we eat." Not what we're talking about here. What is it? Well, we don't have as strong of a sense of this idea of blessing in our modern world. But part of this, at least, would have been inheriting the family fortune. This is something that we're a little bit more familiar with, right? It would have been being the executor of the estate of the entire family, perhaps even power of attorney, deeds to land, retirement accounts, and in some cases, children, if their parents had been lost, right? You might have additional children as a result of having this blessing conferred onto you. So suffice it to say that this was a good thing to have happen to you, right? To get this blessing was pretty sweet. And in order to get it, all you had to do was be the firstborn, right? The firstborn male, in fact, of the family. It was a patriarchy, of course. So to be the firstborn male, that's all you had to do to get the blessing. But in this case, this blessing carries even more weight, because with it comes a promise of God. Back in Genesis 12, Abraham was working with God, and God told Abraham, "Hey, leave this land and go to the land that I am bringing you to, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing to the whole world. I will bless those that bless you, and curse those that curse you. All the people of the earth will be blessed through you, and your descendants will be as numerous as the stars." Right? This is the blessing that God promised to Abraham that passed to Isaac, Abraham's son, who we are now reading about, is at the end of his life. And he wants to bless his firstborn. Esau is the firstborn of Isaac. And I think a lot of us are probably familiar with this story of, Jacob and Esau. They're not exactly the best of friends, right? Even coming out of the womb together, they were not super friendly. And so in this situation, Isaac is telling him, he's saying, "Look, go out, do some hunting." I know some people here who go hunting. I've never been. I do like good deer meat, though. So he says, "Isaac, get your camo, get your blind, get your hunting rifle, put it all in your F-250, go get me something, make me some dinner," right? That's the ask. "And when you do that, I will bless you." Fairly straightforward, right? Not quite. Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food, that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord, before I die. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats, so that I may prepare from them delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And you shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies. But Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Which, what a way to describe yourself, right? Has anyone in here ever described themselves as smooth? Other than like in like a social sense, like a smooth operator? No. Never heard someone describe themselves that way. Yet, that's what Jacob said, right? Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him and bring a curse upon myself and not a blessing. And his mother said to him, Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go. Bring them to me. So Isaac had 2 sons. And, biblical genealogies, of course, are super, super interesting. Actually, I think that they can be. I made an abbreviated one to kind of help us understand this, right? So you got Abraham, right? He's the first patriarch, so to speak. Then you have Isaac and Ishmael, right? The 2 brothers from different moms. Isaac is who we're focusing in on right now, and he has 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. Spoiler alert, by the way, Esau doesn't get the blessing, Jacob does. So through Jacob winds up having 12 kids, which I don't even understand what that means, to have 12 kids. I have 3, and it's a lot. I can't imagine having 12. But he has 12, and they have sons, and, ultimately through Judah, we get Jesus Christ, many, many thousands of years later. So that's what's in view here. And so remember that this promise that's been given to Abraham, then the blessing passed to Isaac, now it's being passed to one of his sons. Jacob's like, I want that. And his mom's like, you need that. You need that blessing. Traditionally, it would go to Esau. So here's the thing about that. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but Jacob didn't actually have to do anything, it turns out. In Genesis 25, we read that while Rebekah, Jacob's mom, was pregnant, she had some birthing pains, right? It was a difficult pregnancy, it sounds like. We don't have a lot of the details, but she's like, it feels like there is a war in my womb. What is going on? And so she asked God, what's going on here? And he goes basically, oh, well, that's just because you have 2 warring nations in your womb, eventually, right? But here's the thing, the younger one is going to be master over the older one. Right there is the promise. Jacob is going to inherit the blessing. She already knows this. Before they're born, she knows who's getting the blessing. And here she is, scheming to try and steal it. Here we start to see some of the dysfunction of this family. Jacob, of course, at this time had already tricked Esau out of his birthright by trading it to him for some soup. And now his mom is hatching a plot to steal this blessing as well. And the dysfunction I'm talking about is, of course, Isaac, in traditional patriarch style, favored Esau, because that's his firstborn, right? First kid, a lot of firsts with your first child. Jacob was favored by Rebekah. Right? So you've got mama's boy, daddy's boy over here. And so they had some conflict. So Jacob does what his mom says. He continues in this deception. She makes the food. She dresses him like a goat to trick their dad. I just want to pause on that for a moment because I know kids lie, and I know kids are deceptive, I would like to think I would not be fooled by this. If somebody came to me and just smelled like a goat and wore goat clothes, I'd probably go, why is that person wearing a goat? Not, oh, that must be my other hairy son, right? But, he was old. I don't recall exactly how old he was, but he couldn't see. Anyway, he got away with it. He got away with it. One thing I do know about kids, though, when they want my attention, they do some crazy things to get that attention. I don't know if you've ever seen kids do this. It's amazing the lengths they will go to get somebody's attention. The least of which is, of course, shouting, throwing things, throwing tantrums, and you'd be surprised some of the ways, or maybe you wouldn't, right? So I suppose doing this really isn't that strange when you consider it. But I'd like to think I could tell them apart. This is some next level deception here. So it works. He gets the blessing, and then almost as soon as he is leaving, Esau comes back. So he comes back, and Jacob says to his father, right, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. So that's Jacob being deceptive. Esau comes back, and Esau says the same thing. Hey, I brought your favorite dish. And he goes, who? Okay, if you're Esau, then who was that just now? But he said, your brother came deceitfully and has taken away your blessing. Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning my father are approaching. I will then kill my brother Jacob. But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she called Jacob to her younger son, and said to him, behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. It's an interesting way to comfort yourself, right? I'll just kill him. I don't know. Comfort's not the word I would usually use for that. So Jacob then has to flee, understandably, right? And by his own admission, I mean, Esau's a hunter, like they don't stand a chance. It's not going to happen. So Jacob has to leave. He fled for his life, and he only returned home in the final months of his own life. Here's the thing. None of this was necessary. The blessing, we learned, was already his, as spoken by God to Rebekah. The younger one's going to get the blessing. It was already his. He didn't have to do this deception. Now, we can only speculate about what might have been, right? But if Jacob and Rebekah had just trusted God's promise, Jacob could have saved himself so much heartache. So much heartache. This mirrors our own story, I think, in a lot of ways. Over the last year or so, since September, I've been doing a lot of soul searching, a lot of ups, a lot of downs. And I realized, God has been bringing me through this process, through that course, that I have a deep-seated desire for approval from other people. And I think that's kind of normal, actually. Now, a lot of people would call that people-pleasing or man-pleasing, if you've ever heard this before. Now, I had a pretty normal childhood, I think. It wasn't until my dad had some mental health issues, caused him to, he was schizophrenic, and I'll spare you the details, but he left my mom, and, it was during a point in my life where I had become like a teenager, and it was kind of a weird time for me where they separated. It was really, really, really weird. I didn't know how to sort of handle that. And it was in that absence that I started to feel like something was missing in my life. I couldn't explain it at the time. I mean, obviously, my dad wasn't there, right? But I couldn't articulate those words. So I tried the self-effort way. I was like, okay, I started to watch a lot of stand-up comedy, and then I would sort of regurgitate the material because I wanted to be the funny person, right? The funny person in the room. Or I would, work really hard at, a particular skill, whether it was art or driving a stick shift, right? So I would look for things to take my identity from so I could present that to the world for approval. Even becoming a Christian years later, I wanted others to pat me on the back, right? Who doesn't want a well done, good and faithful servant, right? But in the context of the Bible, it's God saying that, not other people saying that. And that's what I wanted. Instead of seeking God's blessing, I found myself seeking the blessing of my peers, other people. Now, God is still unpacking all of this for me, and I imagine for a large part of my life that will continue. I don't have it all figured out, but what I do know is this. Our culture has a problem. Well, we've got lots of problems, I think we'd all agree. But specifically, more and more kids are growing up without strong families. You hear about it in the news all the time. Absent fathers, missing fathers, single dads, right? There's so much pain and suffering that comes as a result of this issue. There are kids crying out for blessing, crying out for acknowledgement from their parents, and they don't get it. And that's really where it starts, is as children. We seek blessing or validation from our parents, safety, love, affirmation. I was doing some research on this, and approximately 23% of children in the United States live with one parent. 23%, almost 1 in 4 kids live with one parent. A lot of researchers say that the damage caused by a father's absence may be severe and last a lifetime. Children yearn for blessing from their parents. That's all Jacob wanted. Some of us in this room still have wounds from this type of thing because we didn't get the love or blessing or the words that we needed. So what do we do when we don't get this affirmation or blessing? We do what Jacob did. If only I was better at X, Y, Z, then I would be accepted. If only I dressed a certain way or looked a certain way. If only I go to church on Sundays or do good things. If only I were more like this other person. And I don't know if any of you experience this if you're married. I'm sure you do. If only my husband or wife were more like this other person's husband or wife. You ever have this conversation? Why can't you do this? This person does that. Thank you. That's so helpful. Maybe you're here today in this same situation. Families get divided, friends fracture. But how do we fix it? How do we get God's blessing? Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to leave you on a little bit of a cliffhanger. We'll get to that after this next section. But I did want to encourage you that how your parents or your relatives or your friends love you or loved you in the past doesn't define who you are or how much you're worth. God says you're worth everything. Everything that is dear to God, you are worth it. So anyway, back to our story here. Jacob is not doing so well. But maybe after he leaves his situation, things will get better, right? And then after all, that's what a lot of people reason, right? If I leave my environment, if I change my situation, things will get better. Let's see. And behold, what happened was he ran away and he's in the wilderness by himself with a staff on his way to his uncle's, right? His mom's brother. It's the only place he can think of right now that he'd be safe. So he leaves. And on the way there, he falls asleep on a rock as one does. And he had a dream. And in this dream, it says, "And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." So let me ask you, do you see any conditions in that? I don't. Not you do this, and then if you do that, I'll do this. No, it's pretty unequivocal. This is your blessing. I'm going to do this for you. There are no questions asked. So maybe things are looking up for him. Jacob has this dream. God directly speaks to him. And then, of course, it's funny, I don't have it up here just, because Jacob then vows to God. He says, okay, if you do this, and this, and this, and then deliver me back here, then you will be my God. That's what Jacob says to God in the face of this. So you can see he hasn't really learned his lesson just yet, right? He's still trying to fight his way. I'm going to do this, and that's how I'm going to get the blessing, and I'm going to do this, and this guy's offering me this. Well, only if you do these things, God, then you will be my God, right? It's this self-effort that we continue to see. And I think, it's almost comical when we look at it. You're like, here's someone promising you this, and you're like, all right, well, if I can have some food and I can have some clothes, then, okay, then you could be my God, right? He's almost bartering. And we look at this and we go, oh, that's ridiculous. But I think we can relate to this too. I do this. We could be a bit dense. It takes a while for the message to sink in sometimes. Some things can only be learned the hard way. The good news is that God is happy to teach us whether we have to learn things the hard way or the easy way. In Jacob's case, he's about to get a taste of his own medicine from his uncle. So he goes to his uncle, he joins him, and then he says to him, just because you're a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. Now that, my friends, is a blank check. That's what just happened there. What should your wages be? Right? Because it's family. What does he say? Now, Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob, of course, was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. So here again, we see something interesting that's kind of easy to skip over. Who does it say is the oldest? It's Leah. But who does he want? He wants the younger sister, Rachel, not the firstborn. And he's like, I want her so bad, I will work for free for 7 years. So, ladies, if you're dating somebody, okay, you're not married yet, and he's not saying this to you, you might want to point him at Genesis 29. Be like, hey, I'm kind of valuable. Maybe you should take a note from Jacob's book here, right? Yeah, right? I'm just saying, And it says, right, he said, his uncle's like, okay, well, it's better that I give her to you than some other man. Stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days. That's how madly in love with her he was. Now, I did date my wife for 7 years, but most of that I was rather timid and wasn't really sure what to do with it, right? So it wasn't exactly the same thing. And it seemed like years. It did not seem like it was just a couple of days. So, okay, he does that. After 7 years, it's up. Jacob says, all right, now it's time to consummate the marriage. I don't think I need to explain what he wanted after 7 years. But Jacob, at this party that his uncle threw, apparently got pretty drunk. And he got so drunk that he didn't realize that his uncle actually gave him his oldest daughter, Leah, instead of Rachel. Speaking of messed up things, how would you feel if you were Leah? Like, that's kind of cringe, right? And I don't know what weak eyes means. As I tried to research that, it's unclear what weak eyes means. But anyway, Jacob didn't even know that he had done this until the next morning. He was so out of it. And so he was upset, and he asked his uncle, "Why have you done this to me?" And his uncle, I think, I think I'm speculating here a little bit, but his uncle kind of says to him, he's like, "Well, around here, we're not in the habit of giving away our secondborn before our firstborn." And I have to imagine Jacob heard that and went, huh, weird. So what happens next is he goes, okay, well, let me work for you for another 7 years, and then you can have my other daughters. Okay, right? Weird family dynamic. And so he does, right? And he works for him for a long time, over 20 years he's working for him. And, I think that, and the whole time he's getting strung along, right? Oh, well, if you do this, I'll do that. If you do this, I'll do that. And I almost wonder if it's kind of God's sense of humor at him making that vow to God. Hey, God, if you do this. But we experience this too. Our world is hostile. Don't get me wrong, it's dressed up really nice to make us nice and comfortable. But we get cheated. Maybe you don't get paid enough at your job. I feel like most people think that. Maybe you work harder than other people, but you don't get the recognition that you think you deserve. Maybe you've literally had something stolen from you. I know some people in here who've had their car stolen from them. You might feel betrayed, or you might feel maybe that you've betrayed other people, and you're racked with guilt about it. Whether by your own choosing, or as a consequence of living in a fallen world, we have a choice. We can cheat and steal, whatever we have to do to get what's ours, to get our blessing. Or we can trust God that He will preserve us in the face of everything else that we're experiencing. And He does, right? If we look at this, like I've skipped through a lot of this. It's a really interesting story, but God is blessing Jacob so much, right? By this point now, after this 20 years, he's got 2 wives. He's got 12 kids, like I mentioned before. He's got flocks of animals, hundreds of animals. He's got land. He's got servants. All of this while working for his uncle for free. And eventually Laban and his, Laban's sons, Jacob's cousins, are like, he's kind of taken everything that we have. We want that back. He's got too much. And so Jacob once again decides, you know what I'm going to do? Being a stalwart, bold, confident man, of course he runs away. Again, right? Except this time he took his whole family and his servants and his flock with him. Like, I don't understand how you do this quietly. Like later it talks about how Laban had to come after him. Like, you didn't see him taking 200 animals and, 12 children with him? Like, there was some delay, but he eventually caught up with him. They came to an agreement. He's like, okay, you take care of my daughters, right? I won't come bother you anymore. And, they part ways. But now he's just a wandering nomad. His only choice is to return home to his brother Esau, who wants to kill him. So he sends messengers ahead to Esau, specifically bribing him, essentially. He's like, hey, I've got all this stuff. Please let me find favor with you and take my stuff. Don't kill me. So he sends a messenger out, he gets a messenger back. And Esau, he learns, is coming to meet him with 400 men. Now the crafty, devious, tricky Jacob is scared because now he's got something to lose. And so he divides his camps, sends them all away until he is all alone. And then something wild happens. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." He's a pretty stubborn guy. He wants that blessing. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't help but read this scene and think about this. This is what I think was happening for 12 hours. Can you imagine that? A stranger in the middle of the wilderness comes out of nowhere and starts wrestling you and does it all night long in the cold wilderness, only to have the match end because this person you've been wrestling says, "Okay, it's daytime. We're done." My reaction would be like, "Dude, why did you do that? What's going on?" Jacob's reaction? "Yeah, I'll let you go if you bless me." He's still seeking blessing through self-effort. And through this, right, the man renames him to Israel, which means, the one who prevails with God or the one who struggles with God. He does get the blessing, but here's what's interesting about that. If you remember, he already had it. He always had the blessing. It wasn't conditional. He didn't have to do anything for it. He always had it. And so for Jacob, this is the turning point. All of the deception, all of the loss, all of the heartache, alienation, and struggle and pain, and he finally understands, and he lets go. Not before having a permanent limp added to him, right? So now Jacob, who spent his entire life seeking blessings, pursuing God's blessing through human means, finally understands God's blessing is by grace alone. Not birth order, not merit, not deception. This must have been a cataclysmic shift in Jacob's understanding. His whole life up to this point has been completely opposite to what he has just understood. And he realizes, I just wrestled with God, and I didn't die. I didn't die. Jacob realizes that who is older or more worthy in our eyes doesn't even factor into who God decides to bless. Has nothing to do with it. The basis of God's choice on who to bless is simply His will, who He wants to. It's a gift. And the author of Hebrews, bringing us back to Hebrews, says that is the faith that pleases God. The blessing that God wants to give us, though, is not just property rights. It's not a nice house. It's not a decent job. It's not a family. He does give us these things. Jacob had these things. But that is not what God wanted to give him. It's not what God wants to give us. First and foremost, the thing that God wants to give us is His forgiveness, His favor, a place in His family and a role in His kingdom. And that blessing cannot be earned. So how do we get it? Well, God, it turns out, like Isaac, had two sons, so to speak. The firstborn is Jesus, God's Son, with him since the creation, the beginning of time, always and forever. But not only Jesus is he firstborn, he's infinite, he's perfect, he lives up to all of God's glorious standards. He's everything that you want in a firstborn. His secondborn is us, and we could not be farther from that ideal. But God in his mercy took all of the righteousness of Jesus and he chose to put it on us. And he took all of our sin and he put that on Jesus. It is, quite frankly, the most unfair thing that has ever happened in creation. Do you believe that? Do you depend on it? Do you think that you need that? Answering yes to these questions is the definition of having faith. This is something that you can do right now. And if you do this, it means that you're done striving. You're done trying to earn it. You're done trying to be somebody that you think other people want you to be, but you don't have to. So think about that as I draw some conclusions for us. Finally, back to our verse here. Both Isaac and Jacob, right? Our first question is, how in the world does bestowing a blessing on someone demonstrate faith? Well, we've got a much better understanding of blessings now than we did when we started. And so we understand that both Isaac and Jacob eventually sought God's blessing through grace, not works. They didn't do it perfectly. They didn't do it at first. But their faith was established over time looking forward. Looking forward. They believed God and they said, okay, God said he's going to do these things for me. They never saw it. They never saw all these descendants. They never saw this promised land, the established nation of Israel. They didn't see any of this stuff. And yet, they still passed their blessing down because they trusted God. And they knew then that it didn't have to do with birth order or merit. So how do we look forward? We all have parts of a Cinderella story. Right? Whether we're her or her sisters or her stepmom or whatever, right? Put yourself in the story, probably some of all of those at certain points. The question is, how do we, in the face of everything that we've experienced, go forward? How do we look to the future promises of God in the face of where we are? Let me suggest 3 ways that we can do this. First, we understand that we can't earn God's favor. We cannot earn his blessing. So what does that mean for us? Stop striving to be someone that you're not. God knows who you are. He made you. He made me. The question God asks is not, where is your body? He asks, where is our heart? Does it belong to him? Do you trust that he will preserve your job? Do you trust that he will preserve your family? That he has a plan and that you play an important part in his plan? If you're struggling in sin, God sees you. He wants to wrestle with you. He wants to wrestle with me. He doesn't condemn us. God says, I know you have problems. I know you feel trapped. And he says, I will set you free from those things, even if we have to have fisticuffs, right? Even if we have to wrestle a little bit. He invites that. God is not scared of our emotions. He's not scared of our failure. Share your vulnerability with God and with others if you're led to. There's no need to put on a front or a brave face, right? I know for a long time I always thought that I had church friends and then I had other friends. When I was with other friends, we had a lot more fun, right? When I was with church friends, it was cool, but we didn't have as much fun, right? There's no difference, right? There's no need to be different. We've got lots of opportunities for this, right? We have Burden, a ministry that our church has, right? We have small groups. We have discipleship. That's one of the blessings that God gives us this side of heaven is community, a community of believers who can share with one another their struggles, not in judgment, but in grace, the same way that we have been blessed. Second, we act on faith in things that are unseen, right? Hebrews 11, 1 and 2, right? Faith is the evidence of things hoped for, right? What is it? The evidence of things unseen, right? So our lives have two categories of things. Things we have and can see, and things that we haven't or can't see. I can't see if I'm going to die in a car accident tomorrow. I can't do it. I can't see if this teaching is reaching you tonight or if God is speaking through me. But I can see that God has work for me to do. And I can see that He has already blessed me more than I deserve. So should I not go to work because I might die in a car accident? Faith is stepping out in the face of the unknown because God has already told us He will be with us. Just like He already told Jacob, I will be with you. You don't have to earn it. I'm here. Let's do this. We don't need to steal the blessing. It's already ours. One of the ways that we can do this is by counting those blessings. It's actually kind of hard to do. If you've ever sat down to do it, I know the song, right? There's lots of songs about this. Count your blessings. We sing them on Sunday at, like Ivy, things like this. Faith is the accumulation of areas where I know I can trust God. When your faith grows, it's not that your faith gets bigger. It's more that your faith in God extends to more areas of your life. Oh, I can trust God with this because He has done X, Y, and Z. I'm sure there are still many areas of my life that I don't trust God in, and He is gently showing me those as I get older. Third and finally, our actions that we take demonstrate where our faith is. You see this when Jacob was dying. We didn't get to it in the passage here. But he also blessed some of his grandsons, right? Joseph's sons, he blessed two of them, Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh was the oldest. Ephraim was the second-born. Guess who Jacob blessed? The second-born, Ephraim. Joseph takes offense to this, and he goes, Dad, what are you doing? He's the firstborn. But Jacob, finally, after wrestling with God and all of the other things that he's gone through, he goes, no, son. God has told me this is who the blessing goes to, and that's enough for me. We're going to do what God says because God has promised. We are promised in Scripture that nothing done in the name of the Lord will ever return void. Do we act like that? I know there have been times where I go, this is probably a waste of my time to go talk to this person. We're told that we are given power and authority to heal. Do we pray for that? Do we act like that? Maybe you do, and if so, let me hear about it because I would be super encouraged to hear how you do that because I want to incorporate that into my life too. Now, for you parents in the room, it means please invest in your kids while you can. Show them not only that you love them, but how to love others sacrificially. This is the affirmation they need. It's the blessing that they need. Don't be absent on your phone. I know it's hard. After a long day and they're screaming and they're fighting and they can't even be in the same room with each other without someone crying or being hurt, it's like, I want to put them in front of a screen because it's the only thing that calms them down. But I can't do that. Right? Take time off work to be there for your kids, for their events. Bring them with you as you serve other people. Even if it's bringing somebody a meal, take your kids with you. I know it's inconvenient. It takes you an extra 20 minutes just to get them loaded up and then another 20 to get them unloaded. But it's so worth it. Dad, why are we doing this? Let me tell you why. It's because God asks us to. You may not see the fruits of your labor with your kids, much like Isaac and Jacob did not get to see the promised land. But God promises us that what we do in his name will not return void. For those of you who don't have kids yet, or maybe you're in school, school is starting soon, right? When does Kent start? It's like next week, isn't it? It's like the 18th or something like that. Anyway, starting soon. You're going to meet new people in your classes. You're going to have struggles with projects and with finals and with bad teachers. You've got amazing potential in that situation to be used by God to save the souls of your classmates. Literally the most significant thing that you could do as an act of faith is talk to them about Jesus. Don't be limited by trying to fit in or seeking affirmation from your peers. God already gives you this for free. You don't need to go get it from somewhere else. You've got it. And if you aren't starting class soon, and you find your house is a bastion of peace and quiet, if there's any empty nesters here, maybe you've never had the privilege of kids, these are golden years for you. I cannot stress this enough. I always thought when I first got married, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so busy now. And then I had kids, and I went, oh. Oh. You've got so many opportunities. You've got blessings upon blessings, especially the older you are in Christ. You've seen some things. God has shown you some things. Please share those with younger generations. We need to hear it. We need to see it. Someone who's lived it out, because it builds our faith as well to see that. Share these blessings with those around you. Jacob for sure would have been on Deal or No Deal, right? Or something like that, because he's crafty, right? He's a thinker. He was stubborn. He was dedicated, committed, right? Working for 14 years to get 2 wives without pay. That's pretty committed. He didn't always use those gifts that he was given appropriately, but God certainly gifted him uniquely for that purpose, just like he has gifted each of us for a unique purpose as well. So it's by faith that we bless those around us, just as Isaac and Jacob passed their blessing on by faith. How does God want to use you in this way? So what, do we want to have some people come up for questions, comments?